Mark, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to getting into all the nuts and bolts of the spa industry
Mm.
and bathhouse industry. And when often well-meaning bathhouses are still doing it wrong, can you walk me through that process?
Well, there's so many ways to do it right, and every location is different and has its own constraints. But with a bathhouse, generally you want to offer what I call hydrothermal wellness, and that is the therapeutic, medical, and relaxation and entertainment elements of water in all its forms. So that's solid, liquid, and gas. So you want to offer ice and cold, warm water and cool water, and then steam and heat. And that's the hydrothermal wellness offering. Generally involves contrast, so hot experiences, which could be a sauna, could be a steam room, could be a hot bath, could be all of the above, could be access to sun or exercise to heat yourself up. So the heat experience is really important. The cold experience is really important, and that's generally a cold plunge. Now there's a trend to have real ice bars where they actually make ice, and I think that's fantastic. So a cold experience could be a cold air experience as well. And then what I believe is the most important is the relaxation experience. And that's where you're thermoneutral and you can totally just relax at a comfortable temperature. So in the hot and the cold, you're practicing being relaxed while you're stressed. And hot and cold are both life-threatening stresses. And then just like in a yoga class where you'll stretch one way and stretch the other, at the end of the class you
Mm.
do a relaxation, and that's when you anchor the benefits. So when you're doing hydrothermal therapies, you want to stress your body with the heat and with the cold, and they're synergistic. You want to do both. But then after, you want to be able to rest and relax and anchor those benefits and achieve real thermal homeostasis. And that's where the benefit is. The facilities have a lot of different ways to provide that. A lot of facilities I see, they'll have a hot experience. They have hot bars or saunas or steam rooms. They don't do the real cold plunge experience. They might do a cool plunge or a cold shower. In a lot of places in the tropics, in Singapore and in really tropical hot areas, the water coming out of the tap is not cold. It's 25 degrees, 22 degrees, or 18 degrees. To have a real cold experience, you want below 14 or 12 degrees, and the colder the better. The water will get the coldest when it's at ice, 0 degrees. But anything around 4 degrees, when water is the most dense, gives you that cold experience, strong basic constriction, that gasp, that and really forces your body to then adjust. Different facilities can offer different ranges of those combinations. I find a lot of facilities don't have a lot of space to provide relaxation.
Yeah.
In Europe, they do that really well, but it's really important to have the hot and the cold, but somewhere where you can go and almost do like a yoga nidra, where you can just lie, readjust, let your body's vasodilated, then it's vasoconstricted. You've had adrenaline rush in the sauna, in the ice bath, and then you've stressed yourself in the sauna. But then you really want something very safe and comfortable and warm, thermoneutral, so where you can really relax. And those places to do that are quite hard to build. I mean, they're expensive. They have to be indoors. It's hard to do that outside where you're exposed to the sun or the wind or the cold. So you need a controlled environment. And ideally, it needs to be quiet and natural lighting and maybe some subdued lighting. So that relaxation experience is, I think, often not thought of as important just because you don't have to have equipment to do that. You just need the space, but you need a really curated space to do that. And then the other elements that a lot of places miss out on is the real cold experience. They have to have an ice bath. And there's something, I think, really primal when you've got ice to play with. So it's not just having, a cold plunge, but having ice in the cold plunge, I think makes a big difference to you psychologically. It adds to more theatre, but it really anchors in that, yeah, this is as cold as you can get. So yeah, the Byron Bay Bathhouse has been doing it really well. They've put a lot of thought into the hot experiences, the cold experiences, and the relaxation experiences. And to do that into a medical context, I think that's also important. Because water's fun, water's entertaining, water is joyful. It is therapeutic, it is medicinal, but it is just part of a lifestyle. I mean, everybody bathes, and our ability to do that comfortably and therapeutically varies according to the facilities we've got. So I think everyone should be doing contrast bathing every day, whether it's just in their shower, doing a hot and cold shower. But to do that into a medical facility where you're actually tailoring experiences to address particular medical conditions, that's where the Byron Bay Bathhouse really really excels. It really distinguishes itself because you've got access to a whole range of integrated therapists, from doctors and nurses to chiropractors, osteopaths, psychologists, acupuncturists, naturopaths, massage therapists. So you've got all the functional medicine, integrative medicine modalities available to then really apply hydrothermal wellness therapies for particular conditions and tailoring that. And I think a lot of facilities don't have access to the medical expertise to be able to do that. So again, the Byron Bay Bathhouse is really distinguished in its ability to apply specialist medical professionals and get them to utilise the hydrothermal therapies in that therapeutic medical context.
Absolutely. And I want to talk more about that. Let me back it up for a moment. If just speaking about the art and wellness industry at large.
Sorry, I just want to finish one other point there.
Absolutely.
One of the other things that is really important when you're doing hydrothermal wellness is hydration. If you're doing water therapies where you're sweating and you're chilling yourself, both of those cause you to excrete water. When you sweat, you lose water. When you chill yourself, it actually puts more blood through your kidneys, so you pee more. So it's really important to stay well hydrated. So you need good quality water, and you need something in the water. You need electrolytes in the water. So again, the Byron Bay Bathhouse has a great opportunity to provide therapeutic hydration with different herbs and tonics and living kombuchas and oxymals and switchels. And a lot of places they'll have a fridge, or they'll have water, but they don't put a lot of attention into that water. So I think it's really important for hydrothermal facilities to really think about the water they're providing people to shower in, but also to drink. And again, that's where the Byron Bay Bathhouse distinguishes itself, because you've got therapeutic beverages and you've got all these tonics, and there's a whole apothecary there of herbal medicines that can be included in the beverages. But other facilities, I think they really need to think about filtering their water and providing other tonics and elixirs to then heighten the experience of the hot and cold therapy.
That's right. And so if we go back to that point, because I understand that this is really important, I believe that the bathhouse is going to be the only bathhouse in our region that filters the water, removes the chlorine. And do you know if it's remineralizing the water as well?
I'm not sure actually what they're doing. I know they've got filtration there. They've got whole house filtration using the beautiful water systems, which both filters, structures, balances, and blesses the water and has it flowing freely. So that, and it is mineralized, so there will be minerals in the hot pools. As far as the showers and things, I think that's filtered water that's been structured and balanced and blessed. There's no specific mineralization there. But you're right, that it is really important to focus on the quality of the water.
And if we look at a bathhouse or a spa that doesn't filter the water, what is the add-on effect for the client? Like for someone that's using...
Well, I could talk a lot about this. Water is the most mysterious substance in the universe. There's 72 scientific anomalies we don't understand about water. Our bodies are made up of 2/3 of water by volume or by mass, but if you count our molecules, we're 99.9% water molecules. That's because water's tiny compared to our big protein and collagen and nucleic acids, etc. So water is so important for who we are as living beings. And I have this theory that drinking less poison is good for you. It's not good to include poison in your diet, and it's not good to put poison on your body. And unfortunately, that's at odds with public health incentives, which they want to avoid cholera and typhoid and big epidemics. So they pre-poison our water with chlorine, and chlorine is... The reason why they use chlorine is it's so poisonous, it will kill living things at 0.5 parts per million, which is the level it comes out of your tap. So that's good for public health facilities to stop mass epidemics and infections, but it's not good if you're drinking that water or putting that water on your body. Chlorine isn't just a super potent toxin, poison, that's why we use it, but it also creates disinfection byproducts. That's chloroform and ethane, and these trihalo methanes that are really poisonous for us, and they get absorbed directly through our skin, they get absorbed through our lungs, and they get absorbed through our digestion when we drink it. And funnily enough, there's been good research on this that shows you actually absorb more chlorine and disinfection byproducts when you either bathe in it or breathe it than when you drink it. Because when you drink chlorinated water, that chlorine goes through your intestine and it gets absorbed by your liver before it goes into the general circulation, and your liver will process that. So you don't get these disinfection byproducts in your blood. But when you're exposed to it in the air, so in a hot shower, for example, where chlorine is very volatile and it goes into the air. You breathe that, your lungs have a very big surface area, and that gets absorbed straight into your blood without going through your liver. So you get this big spike in disinfection byproducts in your blood just by breathing chlorinated water air. And likewise, chlorinated water, the disinfection byproducts from chlorine will go straight into your skin and get absorbed into your blood. So that's not good at all, because chlorine is directly toxic to living things. The other big point about chlorine in terms of bathing is that our skin has millions of little clefts, sebaceous glands and sweat glands, where our bodies secrete oils into. And those oils in our skin protect us from the sun, they protect your skin from drying out, and they feed good bacteria that actually help us avoid bad bacteria. So that's the microbiome of the skin, which is less well understood than the microbiome of our gut, but they're both super important. We really have to protect these microbes. So when you're bathing in chlorinated water, the chlorine oxidizes the natural oils in your skin, so it's stripping away your protective layer, and that makes you more prone to sunburn, more makes you prone to wrinkles and your skin drying out, to get dry skin, and makes you more prone to conditions like seborrheic dermatitis or psoriasis or eczema or dandruff or these dry skin conditions. And it also kills the good bacteria and it enables bad bacteria to thrive. So it makes you more prone to folliculitis or infections, and you've lost your skin barrier. So if you're going to filter any water, it's probably more important to filter your bathing water than it is to filter your drinking water, funnily enough. And that's because you're exposed to more water through bathing than you are through drinking. You might drink 1 or 2 or 3 litres, but you'll bathe in 200 litres. If you're exposed to more water, often the water that you're bathing is warm, so the chlorine's more volatile, so you absorb it through your lungs and your skin, and you're more susceptible to chlorine and disinfection byproducts that come through your lungs and your skin than you are from drinking. So yeah, having filtered bathing water is really important, and it's a bit of a bane of mine existence, where you find out these bathhouses, which are beautifully designed and they've got great facilities and hot and cold facilities, but they're chlorinating the water. For me, that's a deal breaker. I just won't go in there because I know the effects it has on my body.
Even sitting in a spa, everyone knows what that kind of tastes like, what that smells like. Yeah. And so is that required because other people in the spas might have a bacterial rash or they might have something that's contagious? I think everyone collectively, when you get into a body of water that other people are bathing in, you kind of think about hygiene.
Sure. And this is a really big topic, and it really depends on the water, the flow rate of how you're sanitizing that water and how often that water's been turned over, how many people, the bather load that's in the water, the health of the bathers that's in the water. Because sharing bacteria is bad when you're sharing pathogens, but sharing bacteria with other people can actually be really healthy, because you can literally get infected by bacteria from other people. And there's a whole lot of research now around fecal transplantation and expanding your microbial diversity. So it is a concern that you want to have clean water to bathe in. However, I've spoken to a lot of people in the hot spring industry and the bathing industry over the years. I was talking to a colleague who has a very large hot spring in New Zealand, and asking about, how often do you get skin infections? And what he was telling me, over 22 years, where they get 500,000 people a year for this hot spring, so it's like 11 million visitor days, if you like, that they've only really had a few bouts of skin infections, and they all happened when people had been bathing in a chlorinated spa. They'd spent an hour in the chlorinated spa, and then they went to get a massage, and they had a particular, male, very, very vigorous massage therapist, and a lot of his clients were getting folliculitis. And it wasn't his fault. I think what was happening there is, when you're in the chlorinated spa, you're stripping the natural oils away, you're stripping away the good bacteria. So you're exposing your skin, you're getting away the first line of your immune defense, and then you're literally rubbing bacteria into these open pores and into your skin, and that's going to cause the folliculitis. So I think it's much more important about your own health. I mean, if you're immunocompromised, obviously you want to be more cautious. You want to make sure the people you're bathing with are healthy, so you don't want to bathe with someone who's had diarrhea or has got cryptosporidium or giardia. And you want to make sure you're bathing in water that is sanitized and there's a flow rate and a turnover rate. However, it's not that important to bathe in water that's sterile. I mean, water is never sterile. Water doesn't want to be sterile. I mean, seawater is not sterile, lake water, river water, even water that comes out of the ground, where we've done research on that. It's come out from 600 meters underneath. It's got natural bacteria in that water. And a lot of those bacteria can be good for us, but it's a balance. It's like bacteria in food. It can be really healthy for us. So fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, and kombucha, they feed our microbiome. They're super good for us. But we don't want to eat contaminated food with salmonella or Campylobacter and pathogens. So it is an issue. Water sanitation is a really important issue. But I think people are overly concerned, and we've sort of veered too far one way, where we've been so scared of germs, and we're using really strong poisons, chlorine and other disinfectants, to avoid infection. But that actually has its own quite serious cost that we really haven't been aware of. I think most people aren't aware of that nearly as much.
And can you tell me, so I don't want people to get overwhelmed when they listen to this, because it is really important information, and it's crucial to understand at a high level why you might make certain decisions. There's a lot of people that were going to want to use the bathhouse to detox. But you're talking about this compromised situation where they may be retoxing themselves or exposing themselves to more toxins in the process. It doesn't matter at the Byron bathhouse because the water is filtered and there's no chlorine in it. But if they were making that decision to go to a different spa or a bathhouse where it isn't filtered water, it's still got chlorination, is it still better to use the spa? Like, are the overarching benefits better? Or is it still so compromising because, like you say, it's poison? You're actually doing yourself a disservice and you're better off to stay away from the spa.
Well, I think that it's a really important question, but it's very difficult to answer because everybody is different. Everybody has a different health benefit that they're going to get from hydrothermal therapies, and everybody also has a different risk profile and different robustness to their body. Now, I think water is so important in who we are as living organisms and the joy you get from hot and cold experiences, that I would say I wouldn't avoid water just because it's got some chlorine in it. Just like I won't avoid food if I eat food but it's not organic, I'm not going to starve myself. And I'd rather eat non-organic food than starve. But I will be careful of the food I'll choose. And likewise, I'll be careful of the water that I bathe in. If water that's obviously contaminated or that has obvious risks, you avoid that, just like you avoid food that's obviously gone off. But I wouldn't say water altogether if it's chlorinated. But if you have a choice, always go for the water that's closer to nature without poisonous chemicals that have been added to it.
And those things that you can also, like when you're exposed to those chemicals, are they things that are stored in the fat? Do they pass through the system? Like you mentioned that there's a heavier load on the body to process them.
Well, sure. So there's a lot of toxicity contained in water over and above just the chlorine that's added as a disinfection. So there's a whole lot of recent acknowledgement and research and exposure to PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals, the perfluorinated compounds that have basically contaminated every living organism on planet Earth. So these compounds, they call them the forever chemicals. They get dissolved in fat. They're very hard to excrete, and everybody on Earth is contaminated. I mean, that's really tragic. And there are people that, detoxify, and there are processes for detoxifying your body from these chemicals by using different herbs and oils and panchakarma, like Ayurvedic practices. So that's one class of chemicals. There's also recent research that shows that most Australians, most people in the modern world, eat a credit card worth of plastic every week. And that's because of the microplastics in mostly water, in drinking water, so bottled water and even town water. So these microplastics, again, have contaminated pretty much every water source on Earth. They've found microplastics on the top of Mount Everest, down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, 10 kilometres down at the bottom of the ocean. And now they're finding microplastics and nanoplastics now in human testes and affecting sperm. And the microplastics are also a nidus for crystallizing and for attracting other toxic chemicals. So these endocrine disrupting chemicals, and a lot of them are what we call obesogens, so chemicals that affect our endocrine system and make us fat, or they're diabesogens, so they cause diabetes, or they're carcinogens, so they cause cancer. So a lot of these chemicals in our general water supply, they get attracted to microplastics, and then we ingest them and we get exposed to them through bathing. So there's a whole lot of toxic truth that is really, really depressing when you research it, because to realize how polluted the planet is right now, and that every living organism is polluted, and it's really hard to detoxify the environment, but also to detoxify our bodies. And it's really important when you have a medical condition, it's like the straw that broke the donkey's back. When you have this toxic load that builds up and builds up, you only need one other little toxic insult to then have your immune system crash down, to instigate chronic fatigue or cancers and a whole range of conditions. So it really is important to detoxify regularly, and hydrothermal therapies, saunas and cold plunge, will help detoxify you, because you vasodilate and then you vasoconstrict, and that picks up all the waste products and forces it through your liver and your kidneys, so then you expel them and you have good hydration. So it's a really important part of your daily detoxification practice, just like bathing is an important part of our hygiene cleanliness practice. We all like to bathe to feel clean on the outside. So hydrothermal therapies help us clean ourselves from the inside or from the inside out. So that's really important. And you do want to minimize the toxic exposures. So it's important to have filtered water for that reason. So that's whether it's PFAS or heavy metals or petrochemicals or pharmaceutical residues or microplastics or nanoplastics. So all of these are out there. And yeah, you don't want to be too terrified and stop the fear of toxicity from doing anything, because it can be paralyzing, and you just become despondent when you realize how polluted the whole planet is. But I think it's really important to be aware of that and minimize them as much as possible. And again, at the Byron Bathhouse, I've been consulting with them to say, how do we minimize this to create the best and safest experience, not just for people for entertainment and for wellness purposes, but for real medical purposes, to address people who are potentially immunocompromised or do have serious toxic loads because they've had an environmental exposure or an occupational exposure, and how can we help them overcome that? So I think there has been more thought and preparation in developing the Byron Bathhouse than there would be for just a public wellness facility.
Absolutely. That's very much the impression that I've got. And can we talk about some of the profiles of the people that would use the bathhouse and how that protocol would change for them? So you mentioned somebody that is got chronic fatigue. So fatigue is definitely one. But if we talk about like maybe 5 of the common users that the bathhouse would see, and then 5 ways that you think the bathhouse packs a really powerful punch in terms of what therapeutic benefits it's got to offer.
Well, I think at the Byron Bay Bathhouse, and I've been practicing as a integrative doctor and doing medical cannabis prescribing at the Health Lodge for a few years now. So I'm aware of the patient profiles, because often the Health Lodge at Byron Bay gets very complex medical patients that haven't been helped by conventional medicine. So people with chronic fatigue, with PTSD, with anxiety and insomnia and fibromyalgia and various cancers, various autoimmune conditions, various gut conditions, irritable bowel and IBS and inflammatory bowel disease. So a whole range of autoimmune and other sort of chronic conditions, diabetes and that's heart disease and all the standard sort of medical conditions as well, are really prevalent in our community, and they're very, very hard to treat from a Western medical perspective. Sometimes you just try and control the symptoms. So they're often the patients that will come to the bathhouse, and it's really been designed for those people in mind.
And if
the second part of that question? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so now that we know the kind of profiles of some of the users,
protocols.
How would they navigate the bathhouse differently? And also, if I can ask first, what would the differences you'd recommend for a man and a woman when they walk into any bathhouse if they're going to use that cold, hot therapy? If they're going to use infrared sauna, why and how would they use it differently?
So, the ways to use the bathhouse are different for everybody. Everybody's different. And whether you're a man or a woman, or whether you've got a chronic disease, or whether you're healthy and you just want to improve your health, there are different approaches. I really like to talk about the general principles that you would use for everybody. And there's some general protocols that have been sort of tried and tested throughout the ages, because hydrothermal wellness and contrast bathing is not new. This is thousands of years old. The ancient Romans were masters at this. The Japanese have been doing it for generations. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, used to prescribe contrast bathing, as did Avicenna, the prince of physicians in ancient Persia. They were using hammams and cold plunge. So this is what I call ancient future medicine, because it's based on treatments that our hominid ancestors did before humans were even, Homo sapiens. And we've now created a very sophisticated approach to these treatments. But the general protocols are to rinse. So you want to rinse off first to get rid of any personal care products on your body, to prepare your skin, to acknowledge that you are going to a special ritualized experience. So it's not just a normal bath, you're actually going to a ritual experience. So having a rinse is really important. And then generally you start with heat and you do hot, cold, rest and repeat. And the heat it can be different. You can go into an infrared sauna, you can go to a traditional sauna and use steam, you can go into a steam room, you can use exercise to heat your body up, you can use a hot bath, 42 degrees or up to 45 degrees, or in Japan they use 47-degree hot water, which is excruciating. So to have a heat experience, I think, is really good to start the process after rinsing, and then to do a cold experience, and that cold can be just cold air, depending on the time of day. It can be accentuated with cold air with a fan on your body, and you get the wind chill factor. It can be a cold shower, a cold plunge, or even up to an ice plunge. And then after the cold, that's when it's good to exercise. And often people think I do the cold after exercise for recovery, but we're actually finding that while cold can help with recovery, it actually helps with performance. If you do cold before exercise, you actually can do more exercise because your muscles are more primed, their waste products are depleted, they're cool, so they've got more room to heat up. So if you can do hot, cold, maybe exercise, but then rest. And the rest is, we talked about rest as being really important because that's when you anchor the benefits. And then once you've done a rest, and I suggest 5 or 10 minutes as like a yoga nidra relaxation, like deep rest. And then it's good to repeat it. And every single time you do that sequence will be different. So the first time you do it, you do a first round, you're sort of calibrating your body. How do I feel today? And that'll depend on what you ate last night, or what things are going on in your head, or what medical condition you're suffering from. So you sort of calibrate with the first round of hot, cold, rest. And then the second round, you can go deeper. And the aim for most people, and there isn't no real prescription to say this temperature for this long. I think that's giving people advice that it's hard really to follow. It's much better to follow the advice of you do the hot experience until your mind and your body get on the same page. And that's the point what I call forced mindfulness, because there's a point when you're getting hot, and it could be in a hot bath or a steam room or a sauna, where your mind says to your body, hey, let's get out. Or your body says to your mind, hey, I'm struggling here, it's time to get out. And it's similar to if you're doing yoga and you're stretching your body, there's a point where your body says to your mind, hey, don't stretch anymore, we're going to hurt ourselves. And at that point, that's the point of forced mindfulness, where your mind and your body are forced to be on the same page. And the way that your mind and body unite is through the breath. So at that point, when your body's saying, hey, let's change, this is getting too extreme, you can then have the opportunity to do a couple of relaxed breaths. Just like you would in yoga. You stretch, you get to the limit of your stretch, or the limit of your heat tolerance, or the limit of your cold tolerance, and then just do a couple of breaths. And what you're doing is you're practicing being relaxed under stress. And that's a really key point. That's the point of forced mindfulness, or the point of being comfortably uncomfortable. So you've recognized, hey, I'm really uncomfortable now, but I can handle it. And you can practice being comfortable with discomfort. And that will change for everybody day to day or minute to minute. So there's no prescription, but getting to that point of how willing are you to be uncomfortable, relaxing for just a few breaths in that discomfort, and then changing. And then you go from the hot to the cold, and you do the same. You wait till your body says, hey, it's getting really cold here, we need to get out. And you acknowledge that, do a few relaxed breaths, and then change. And one of the other things that I think is really important, the relaxation is the key, because that's when you anchor the benefits. But when you're really hot, it's joyful to cool down. And somewhere between hot and cold is perfect. So it's nice to, as you're really hot, as you're cooling down, to try and notice, when do I reach perfect? When is that bliss point of total homeostasis, when your body doesn't have to do anything because it's at the perfect temperature? And that cooling down when you're hot is really joyful, but also when you're cold, warming up is really joyful. So to focus on, I really love to focus on fun, focus on the joy, and that's your body signaling that you're doing something right. So this should not be uncomfortable, it shouldn't be painful, it shouldn't be uncomfortably uncomfortable. It needs to be comfortably uncomfortable.
I love that.
So when you're really cold, experience the joy of warming up. When you're really hot, experience the joy of cooling down. And try and notice the perfect temperature in between the hot and cold. And then you wallow in that perfection. And that's when your stress hormones settle down, where your blood pressure settles down, where your breath rate and your heart rate all settle down, and you can actively do nothing. And for me, that's the aim. Just like the aim of yoga, physical yoga and yoga postures, is to find a comfortable seat for meditation so you can literally do nothing and you can turn your mind off. Hot and cold therapies, the aim is to get your body into a position where you're really comfortable and you can actively do nothing. And you're actually facilitated by the water. So, for example, when you're immersed in cold water, I mean, no one really wants to go into an ice bath. It's not comfortable. But you're forcing yourself to do something that's not comfortable, so that's really good for your willpower and exercising your willpower to stop you procrastinating and making you realise, hey, I can do stuff that's not fun, that's not comfortable, and I can achieve that. Making the decision to go into the cold is one thing. But once you're in the cold, your mind turns itself off to save energy. Because your monkey mind, that's just the thinking of your monkey mind, takes about 20 to 25% of your energy all the time. The glucose and the energy produced by your body is used by your brain, about 20%. So when you're in the cold, to preserve energy, your mind turns itself off. And that's great for saving energy. It's activating the mammalian dive reflex that mammals get when they go into cold. And especially if you put the cold water on this part of your face, you activate the mammalian dive reflex, which turns your mind off and you experience deep calm. So it's a way of achieving meditation through the body. You don't have to work at it. The meditation happens normally because your mind turns itself off. And it's really nice to keep that calm with you. So once you've gone into the cold, that's when you rest. And then you can try not to reactivate your mind and you keep that level of calmness and mental clarity and peace with you. And then you can actively do nothing. So, a general protocol, whether you're a man or a woman or someone with a chronic disease or healthy, I mean, rinse, hot, cold, rest, and then repeat. And I like to do, if you really want to go deep, to do 3 rounds. So the first round is sort of a bit of a calibration. How do you feel today? The second round, you go deeper. And the third round, you can go really deep. And you'll find that when you're going really deep, it's a very internal process. So you're really tuning into your body. And there are ways to activate your parasympathetic nervous system while you're in this sympathetic adrenal situation of cold water or even in the sauna. I can share some poetry and some ways to do that. But yeah, you want to relax while you're stressed in the hot and cold, and then you want to relax while you're relaxed in the thermoneutral relaxation zone.
Wow, that's great. And knowing all of that, I think really mentally prepares somebody to challenge themselves a little bit more and also understand that it is a self-guided protocol because no one is going to be able to tell you when you reach those points. Only you are going to know.
That's true, although again, in a medical setting and for people who are new to this, it's really good to have a guide. Because while you need to be self-guided by your own sense of comfort or discomfort, it's really good to have a coach. And we're actually been working with the Victorian government and Peninsula Hot Springs to develop a diploma of hydrothermal wellness, where we're training guides to take people through a hot and a cold and relaxation, forest bathing, and all these experiences. Because if you're not, it's just like going to a gym. If you go to a gym and you don't know what to do and there's all this equipment, it's a bit scary and you might hurt yourself. So having a personal trainer or someone to guide you through, here's the equipment, here's how to use it, here's how to be safe, that can really help. And also, when you're doing cold, I mean, most people have had hot experiences in their lives. They've either been out in the hot weather or they've been into a sauna or a hot bath. Not as many people have had ice baths or had a really cold experience. So that can create a bit of anxiety. And the cold itself, when you go into a very cold experience, it reproduces the breathing pattern and the body chemistry of trauma and anxiety. Your first reaction when you get into an ice bath is you gasp and you start to go like that. And that's the breathing pattern of panic. So if you've had anxiety or PTSD or trauma in the past, you're reactivating those same pathways, the same neural pathways and the same body chemistry. And that can be terrifying if it's out of your control, because suddenly you're in this panic again. But if it's in your control, it's very empowering, because suddenly you can reactivate that past trauma in a way that you're in full control. Because you're in the ice bath, you're sort of freaking out, but you can get out any time you want and you can go into the sauna or the hot bath. So this is not a life-threatening situation. And by realizing that and bringing your breath under control, it's very empowering because you realize, hey, I can overcome the anxiety using my own willpower. So that's a really valuable experience, having that cold. But again, having someone there to guide you and help you, and even looking in someone's eyes can actually often be very calming. I've done quite a few ice baths with multiple people, and it's nice when you do it as a group. You get this group bonding because you've all gone through this severe emotional experience. But even having someone to look at and calm yourself down, and if they can do it, I can do it. It gives you confidence that you can do it, rather than just sort of freaking out and feeling the pain of your feet or your hands or whatever it is that's worrying you in the cold. So yeah, it is a very much a self-guided experience, but it is great to have experienced therapists and guides there with you to make sure you're safe and to give you confidence that you can do it. Just like, you can do yoga by yourself, but it's nice to have a yoga instructor there. They'll give you a bit of guidance and take you a little bit further than you might go by yourself. And that's what the Byron Bay Bathhouse is about, to have this facilitated experience. So whether it's your first time or whether you want to expand your practice or go deeper, there's people there to guide that.
And when you talk about vasodilation, like if I'm a health nut and I'm really interested in performance, whether that be mental output or physical performance, what am I doing? Like, what are those stresses doing to my body? Is it going to improve my performance?
Almost certainly, yes. I mean, contrast bathing has been used by a lot of elite athletes. I have one of my PhD students, Lauren Burns, she won the gold medal for Taekwondo at the Sydney Olympics, and she did her PhD on elite athletes and looking at their performance and asking them, and she was only interviewing world champions for her thesis. So she did these in-depth interviews and asked them, how do you stay at the top of the world in your sport for multiple years? And what do you do? What do you think? How do you train? And we found that social connection was really important, and that hadn't been widely discussed, but all of them did ice bathing, and they're all using contrast bathing to enhance their performance. And there is a lot of different processes. So there's, molecular changes that happen when you're hot and cold. There's cellular changes, there's physiological changes, there's psychological changes, and they all sort of stack onto each other. So just changing your body temperature will change how hemoglobin will bind to oxygen and either release oxygen or hold on to oxygen. And so, for example, when you're cold, hemoglobin binds oxygen very tightly, so it means the oxygen's not available for your tissues. So you get a relative hypoxia, which stresses your tissues. And the mitochondria, which normally burning the oxygen, they get stressed. And what they do then is, it's just like if you're at home and you can't find something and you're stressed because you can't find something, activates you to clean up your house. And when you clean up your house, then things can be found very easily. Well, your cells do the same thing. When they're stressed, they realize, hey, we're really stressed. There's these proteins that aren't folded properly, and there's these old mitochondria, and there's old cells that are aberrant or aging or precancerous. Let's get rid of them. Let's throw them out. So they get the dumpster and they chuck stuff out and they recycle it. So this is a way of decluttering your cells and your molecular machinery. So that actually improves performance. Just like if you clean up your workshop, you can do more work because you know where your tools are. Well, your cells are the same. When they clean up their workshop, their mitochondria, their proteins, you actually perform better.
And is that true for the brain as well? Like, are you pruning dendrites like when you're fasting? Is there something that happens in that mechanism?
There are so many. So that's at the molecular level. Then you got the at the physiological level we can talk about is when, and that's sort of the most obvious effect is when you go into the heat, you vasodilate. So all the blood goes to the outside of your body and you get pink, you start to sweat, your heart beats a lot harder, you breathe a bit faster, oxygen gets released more into the cells. But when you're doing that with heat, flushing your muscles and the outside of your body with blood, but you're not using your muscles. So you're not making new metabolic waste products. And any metabolic waste products or inflammatory chemicals, they get swept away, they get washed away. So this is a way of cleaning up those waste products. And then when you go from the hot to the cold vasoconstricts you. So it's an exercise for your blood vessels, but that forces the blood through your liver and your kidneys. And when your blood goes through the liver and kidneys, it excretes those waste products that it picked up when you are vasodilated. So you've got this expansion of vasodilation and then collecting waste products, and you've got the contraction of vasoconstriction and then flushing that through your body. So it's important to stay hydrated. So that's a really great physiological detoxification. And again, you're cleansing the body, and when you've got less waste products in the body, you're going from your body becomes more efficient, and so your performance increases. And you've got roughly 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels in your body, those blood vessels are lined by smooth muscle, which is not under your voluntary control. And we know that the used to be the biggest cause of death was cardiovascular disease. Now it's cancer. Heart attack and stroke are still the second biggest cause of death, and that's hardening of the arteries. And a lot of people don't exercise their blood vessels because they're comfortable all the time. They're nice and warm. They've got central heating. They've got jackets and jumpers and heated houses and cars. So they're not vasodilating and vasoconstricting. And most adults don't even sweat that much unless they're outside doing manual labor. So to actually stress your body, to force your body to cope with thermoregulatory stress, which is like a life and death stress, because if you're too hot or too cold for too long, you die. So thermal stress is really primal. It's a very primal stress, not just for your whole body, but for your organs and your cells. So having that expansion of the vasodilation and then the contraction of the vasoconstriction, it's like a bicep curl for your blood vessels. You're exercising all your blood vessels and it's sort of forcing them to open and close, which you can't just do that voluntarily, although unless you're super advanced yogis, I've seen them actually change the blood vessels on their hands and things. But it gives you the ability to exercise all your blood vessels, change the distribution of metabolic waste products and expel them from your body. So that's the physiological effects. And then you've got the psychological effects of overcoming procrastination. As I say, no one really wants to get into an ice bath, but the fact that you're actually deciding to do that or jump into a cold plunge or something, that your decision to do that is showing you can do the hard things that need to be done. And that when you do it, you're safe, you're okay, you can tolerate it. So that's really empowering psychologically. Also, the psychological benefits of overcoming that stress, of that anxiety and panic into a cold, or even if you're really hot, your ability to tolerate discomfort is really a valuable skill to have. Now, we know that saunas were basically, that sauna is actually a Finnish word, and they were sort of invented and promoted mainly in Finland. So I think Finland's got the most saunas out of any country in the world, like 2.5 million saunas for 3.5 million people. And sauna is the only Finnish word in the English language. And in Finland, the sauna experience includes both hot and cold, because they take the cold for granted, because you have a sauna and then you go out and you jump in the lake or the river or the snowdrift. So they're doing contrast bathing. And the Finns have a particular word called sisu, which means being happy with less, or having just enough and being happy with it. And the Finns regularly, I think it's the last 7 years in a row, being classified as the happiest country in Europe. And I think it's for this attitude of, we can be happy with, whatever circumstance. And the fact that they're saunaing regularly really tunes them into, what their bodies need to be happy, and just having a nice temperature and going to the extremes. But also they do it socially. So there's the psychological benefits of tolerating stress. There's also the social benefits. And saunaing, I know in Finland, but around the world, is often seen as something you do with friends. You can actually do it with other people. And there's a real benefit of both giving support and receiving support. And that exchange of support is really good for us as human beings. So experiencing stress with other people and then having this shared stressful experience. Our ancestors would have done that all the time, every time they were going for a hunt or being chased by a wild animal. But we don't do that. I mean, maybe in sports, we create these stressful environments and we have these emotions of overcoming that. But in hydrothermal bathing, it's a way of really doing that at a physiological level. So that's really good psychological benefits of overcoming anxiety and stress, knowing that you can do things, the hard things to do, and also having that social benefit as well. In terms of what's happening in our brains, again, that's different for everybody because everyone's got different histories and different approaches. But as a general rule, going through this, it's a cleansing of your metabolism, and it's a exercising of your metabolism and your cardiovascular system. And at a molecular level, we know that there's heat shock proteins and cold shock proteins that get released, and they protect your other valuable proteins from being poorly folded and not working efficiently. So you just increase your cellular efficiency and increasing your ability to do respiration, to actually metabolize oxygen and glucose. And that happens in the mitochondria. And you can very quickly make new mitochondria. There's a process called mitogenesis, which is producing new mitochondria, which can happen a lot faster than producing new cells. And that's stimulated through hot and cold therapy as well.
Incredible. I love the depth of the knowledge that you have, and thank you for sharing those details with us. I'm thinking now back to that person who's navigating the bathhouse for themselves, and they might have a different goal in mind. So now that we've got your pro tips
I've got lots more pro tips.
I'm going to get more from you too. But the
Okay.
pro tips on how you would navigate the bathhouse. We've got red light therapy, we've got infrared sauna, we've got the hot and the cold, we've got the spa, we've got the scrubs at the start and the end, and we've got teas.
Mhm.
If I was going there for weight loss
Mhm.
versus someone that was going there for performance, does your recommendation still stand for both?
Yeah, I mean, to be guided by your own level of comfort, I think it's a general recommendation for everybody. If you're focusing on a particular condition, whether it's, I mean, weight loss, you wouldn't just do bathhouse for weight loss. It'd be a whole life, it'd be part of a whole lifestyle program. And you want to then, if you're going for weight loss, and there's quite a bit of research now and a bit of talk around brown fat and how when you chill your body and you get to the point where you're shivery, that stimulates your brown fat production. And brown fat is, I was talking about mitogenesis, making new mitochondria. So brown fat is fat that has much more mitochondria. And it's generally the fat that's built, it's around your mediastinum, around your heart and lungs and your big blood vessels. It's like a heater coil for your blood. The mitochondria in brown fat are thermogenically decoupled, which means they burn glucose, but instead of using that energy for muscle contraction or cellular activity, they just generate heat. So it's like this little fat layer that just makes heat and warms your blood. And the preferred fuel for brown fat is white fat. So you actually take the white fat from around your midriff or where you store white fat, and you preferentially burn that in brown fat to keep your body warm. But to stimulate brown fat, you have to sort of push your level of tolerating cold to get to the point where you're shivery. And I mean, you can go to the point of shivering, but if your teeth are chattering and you're really cold like that, you've gone too far. You don't have to go that far, and it's actually not helpful to go that far. But it's good to get to the point where you're shivery, where you're a little bit shivering, but you can stop it if you want to. But at that point, your body has dropped its body temperature, and it realizes it has to turn on its heating mechanisms to heat itself back up. And that's a really powerful metabolic change, and that can then potentially burn white fat and be used with weight loss. But you'd certainly use other programs of diet and exercise, etc. But that can change your metabolism, because setting your basal metabolic rate and your thyroid is really important, and that can be done using hot and cold. So someone using or going for weight loss might spend longer in the cold plunge so they can get to the point where they're shivery, and making sure they're actually dropping their body temperature to the point where they're uncomfortable, but they're comfortably uncomfortable. They're a little bit shivery, so it requires their metabolism to heat up. And then they might heat up a lot slower. So they're actually using their metabolic heat rather than using the sauna or the hot tub to heat themselves back up. So then you're forcing your body to generate its own heat. You're turning your thyroid on, because your thyroid has to increase your basal metabolic rate. And that's a really good approach for improving your metabolism for weight loss. Whereas if you're looking at performance, it depends if you're doing it before or after exercise, or you're just doing it as part of your training, there's be a different approach. Again, you'd still use the cold, but you might actually do a cold plunge and then have an exercise routine after you've been in the cold, to then heat up your muscles using exercise. And that actually then enhances the performance. And there's quite a few sports people that pre-cool themselves before their sport, so it stops them overheating, but it actually enhances performance. And so it's a really nice exercise to do. If you try and do a few push-ups or dumbbells or weights or something, just see how many you can do, go into a cold plunge, get out of the cold plunge, and then see how many you can do. And almost certainly you'll do many more and much easier after a cold plunge than you will before. So that can help with performance. And everyone's got different aims, whether you're an endurance athlete or a strength athlete, or if you want to put on muscle bulk, or you want to just improve strength and fitness. Everyone has different goals. So it's really hard to give overall recommendations. And that's, again, at the Health Lodge, there's all these therapists that can then help guide you in that process. But having these tools, and these are really powerful tools, although they're super simple. Hot water and cold water and steam and ice are very simple tools, but they're very, very powerful for playing with our metabolism, playing with our psychology and our mind, and changing how our body relates to itself and how we work.
And to be really didactic about it, if you had to choose one therapy, or maybe if people were trying to decide, do I buy an infrared sauna or an ice bath, what's the best bang for buck?
Well, I'll just buy a water filter and have a hot and cold shower, and have a bathtub and a water filter as a basic minimum, because in the bath you can heat that up and you can overheat yourself. And I'm very lucky at home here in Melbourne. I have two saunas. I have an infrared sauna and a traditional sauna, and I do use them, but I'd probably use my hot bath even more. and I'll make the bath really, really hot. And after 10 minutes, I have to get out. And then sometimes I'll do a cold plunge, but more often I'll just go outside, especially in Melbourne winter, and just lie in a hammock in the cold air and let myself cool down gradually. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on equipment. I mean, there's amazing, beautiful plug and play ice baths now that, for $10,000 you can get one and it makes ice and it's great. And, all sorts of saunas, whether infrared saunas or traditional saunas, you can spend, a few thousand or tens of thousands of dollars on those. But to get the basics of hot and cold, a hot shower, cold shower, a bathtub with some bags of ice in it, can be done very inexpensively. And there's ice bars you can get, which are these sort of glorified big buckets that you can, for $100, you can just sort of, like a big garbage bag, you can put some ice in and do that as a cold plunge. Depending on where you are in the world, often there's rivers and lakes and oceans that you can just swim in all year round and do cold water swimming. So you don't have to necessarily spend a lot on equipment, although the equipment is slowly catching up. I'm still waiting for a company, I'm trying to work with companies to make a home health retreat where you can buy a sauna, ice tub, ice bath, hot tub, water filter, red light system all in one. And we're working on that, and hopefully that's going to become available in the next year or two. But I think the industry is still trying to catch up with some of the research and the popular trend of hydrothermal wellness. But if I was going to spend on anything, it would be the quality of my water. I'd buy a water filter and then just use my water heater at home and maybe my freezer at home and use hot and cold there. And then it's a personal preference. Personally, I like the traditional saunas with hot rocks because I love to play with steam, and with a fan, like a Chinese fan or a towel, you can push that steam around and really blast yourself with heat. You can also use essential oils in the steam, and then you get the benefits of the plant essences, and they can be mucolytic and immune enhancing, and they smell great. And the other thing I really love to do is when I'm really hot and I'm right at the edge of my tolerance in the heat, in the traditional sauna, and I'm just about to get out because it's just too much, I get some ice water and I pour it on my head or on my feet. And pouring ice water on your head doesn't sound great, but when you're really hot, it's just the most delightful thing. And it gives you the shiver giggles when your whole body it's just really delightful. And then what that does, it cools you down and extends the time you can spend in the sauna. So you can't do that in an infrared sauna because you can't pour water on yourself because you've got electrical equipment. So I like the traditional sauna for the steam and the ice water that I can pour on my body while I'm in the sauna. But I think really whatever makes you sweat, that's going to be the best. It's something you can afford, that you're going to use regularly, that'll make you sweat, and then to have a cold experience. And cold experiences are generally more accessible because you can just use a cold water, cold shower, cold bath. If you have to, you can put some ice in it. For quite a few years, I was doing ice baths here where I was just making ice in my freezer and in a flexible plastic container. If you use a rigid plastic container, often it'll crack making ice. So you just fill up water in a flexible plastic container. Overnight, my freezer would make 50 kilos of ice. And I'd put that in my bathtub, fill the bathtub up, smash the ice up, and have an ice bath. And I got my kids to do that as well. And that I didn't have to buy any equipment. I just used my bath and my freezer. And then, so yeah, there's lots of different configurations, and that's the wonder of this. And I've got a whole range of products now I'm developing and selling, and whether it's ice bars or I'm working with sauna companies, I'm working with hydration and vinegar and oxymals and drinks. What I tell people is, I will research the best and make the best and offer the best, but I like to be able to tell people how they can do it themselves at home for free. So there's ways you can do this. You don't need to spend anything. You just have to maybe go a bit further out of your way, but there are ways to do this at home for free. And even having a whole house water filter, while that's so important, if you have a bathtub, you can fill that bathtub with really hot water, leave the fan on, and wait for 15 or 20 minutes. And what will happen is the chlorine will evaporate, will be volatile, will evaporate out of the bath. The fan will expel that out of your house, and suddenly you've got a chlorine-free bath without having a water filter. So there are ways around of doing this, because a whole house water filter is a luxury. Well, I think it's a necessity, but not everyone can afford it, or sometimes you don't have access to the mains pipe, so you can even filter the water in your house. So there are ways of doing it yourself by using heat and evaporating the chlorine off. But yeah, so there's lots of options.
Love that. And I love that you're working in a way where there's almost no barrier for anybody. It's just the comfort factor. And there's literally every single person that's listening is probably having a sober moment to themselves saying, okay, I can do something and it's not going to cost me anything, just going to cost me a bit of a comfort challenge with
That's
a lot
it.
of reward.
It's the willpower. I mean, I've got a whole routine. I call it the cold water hokey pokey. and it's a way of just having a cold shower that's comfortable. And I developed this 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe more, when I'd been touring with Wim Hof, and we were having these big groups of taking big groups of people through ice bathing. And then I was running a retreat at Gwingana, which is this luxury health retreat in Queensland, and we're getting a whole lot of sort of corporate people, but also mainly women, 45 to 75 years old, and they said, "Oh no, we can't handle water. We don't do cold." But I was so passionate about the benefits. I was saying, how can we make it available and accessible to them? So I worked out a way, and basically it's easy. If you start with a hot shower, everyone loves a hot shower. So you start with a hot shower, and then after you've soaked yourself up and done what you do in the shower, you turn the heat up. So suddenly you're flushed and you're a bit prickly hot and you're vasodilated. And then you make the decision, you need the willpower, you make the decision to turn the hot water off and the cold water on, but then you just wet your left foot. That's okay, because you're being really hot and the cold water's on your left foot, and then you put it on your leg. And that pushes the cold blood from your leg into your core. So you're still warm. And then you do your right foot and your leg and your left hand and arm and your other hand and arm. And you keep breathing calmly and smile to yourself, because that's what it's all about. You want to be comfortable and breathing calmly and smiling to yourself while you're tolerating that. And then you take a big breath in, and as you're breathing out, as you're sighing, you put your left side in. And normally when the water would hit the left side of your body, especially the blood vessels near your neck, that's when you'd gasp. So normally cold water, normally you'd go like that. But if you've taken a big breath and then slowly breathing out when that happens, you feel the cold, but you don't get the emotional shock. You don't get the breath response. So you're feeling the cold, but it's suddenly, you're just noticing the cold. You're not getting that emotional effect. So you put your left side in, your right side in, your front side in, and you turn yourself around. You keep breathing calmly and smile to yourself, because that's what it's all about. Then you take another big breath and put your whole head in. And you move your head around and you stand still, get a drenching, slowly turn yourself around, continue breathing calmly, smile to yourself, because that's what it's all about. And then you go, another breath, and you go, oh, hokey pokey, put the water on your groin. Oh, hokey pokey, put the water on your kidneys. Oh, hokey pokey, put the water on your armpits. And they're the three places where the blood vessels are close to the surface. So you start to cool your body down. And then you'll find you'll be standing under the cold, and you'll be comfortable, and you'll be breathing calmly, and you'll be smiling to yourself, and you'll be feeling good. And at that point, you can turn the cold water off. You get out, and you feel exhilarated. It takes about a minute and a little bit. You've started your day singing and dancing. You feel really exhilarated. You've practiced exerting your willpower, and then that translates to the rest of your life. When there's that difficult job or difficult conversation you have to do, or something you just didn't really want to do, you practice just saying, okay, I'm just going to get on with it and do it, and know that you're okay. So that's a really powerful technique that requires no equipment. You don't need a gym membership. You don't need special equipment. You just do it in your house in the privacy of your own home. It's just the mental decision to do it. So yeah, hydrothermal wellness is super accessible to everybody. There is no barriers to entry other than the willpower. I mean, ideally, you do need hot and cold water. A lot of people in the world don't even have water, so that's a whole other discussion of water sovereignty and access. But yeah, this is super accessible, and now we're seeing it, I guess, go from this grassroots level to quite a sophisticated offering, such as the Byron Bay Bathhouse or some of these urban bathing centres and hot springs where they've got very sophisticated offerings.
Incredible. That's what it's all about. I love the hokey pokey. And I just want to pivot now and go to something that you mentioned before. So you were talking about research and you were talking about infrared saunas. Now, this is a question people ask me all the time. Are we going to regret at any stage that we are currently sitting in a small box, sweating it out in an infrared sauna? Like, is the research 100% clear that as long as the dirty energy is boxed, this is a totally safe practice?
There is no consensus around infrared sauna research. In fact, there is not a lot of research on infrared. I mean, there is some, but it's not super extensive. And that's because infrared saunas don't have huge money behind them. It's not like pharmaceutical drugs where there's big incentive to do lots of research. If you're alluding to the electromagnetic fields that they create, generally you get what you pay for with this sort of equipment. And I know the more high-end companies go a long way to try and reduce the EMF emissions, so they're less than a normal appliance. But if you're, I mean, it's a whole, we can talk about EMF emissions, I'm happy to do that, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down, because we're exposed to them all the time with our Wi-Fi routers, with our mobile phones, with all the other equipment.
I think we operate at the level that we know we want to avoid them, and we don't want to sit in a machine to do good if we're exposing ourselves to bad.
So then it's worth going to if you're worried about that, buying an infrared sauna that from a company that has made an effort to minimise, and that's to do with the shielding, it's to do with the heating elements, etc., that have minimal EMF exposures. Again, there's no pure way, just like PFAS, our water is polluted and our food is polluted, but you still need to drink and eat. So to using saunas, the benefits from the sweat, from stressing your body, from getting your body to turn on its air conditioning unit, to making it sweat, to having your heartbeat, to vasodilating, that's got huge benefits. The impact of the electromagnetic fields is generally minimal, but mind you, there are some people that are electromagnetically sensitive. And they'll know straight away, oh no, I can't go in there. I feel it. So you need to be guided by your own level of comfort, or being comfortable with discomfort. But I think the EMF issue probably around some of the really cheap and nasty saunas can be an issue. But I think in most of the reputable companies, they do have an effort to reduce EMFs to below the level of other household appliances.
And another question that I think a lot of people that have looked into infrared saunas may have is, can you really get a sauna that has near, mid, and far? Can you get all three ranges in
Sure.
one machine?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of development, and I think the development sort of outstripped the research even. So there's a lot of offerings there with near, mid, and infrared light. The research hasn't sort of followed. There hasn't been enough research to distinguish what are the benefits and who should be doing what. So again, you need to be guided by your own feeling, your own pocketbook, and how much you can afford, and the quality and the offerings that are out there. So, because you can imagine to do research to determine that, it's super difficult. I had one of my PhD students, Joy Hussain, she's a medical doctor up in Brisbane, and she spent 8 years studying sauna. And we actually designed, it was going to be the first ever controlled clinical trial that would compare infrared saunas to traditional saunas. And we're actually going to compare traditional sauna, infrared sauna, and exercise, and look at sweat. And we're doing that with the Queensland Institute of Sport. Unfortunately, the traditional sauna malfunctioned, and we weren't able to use it. That study didn't go, or we went ahead, but without the traditional sauna arm. So we did infrared sauna versus exercise, and we've published some data on that and looking at pesticides in sweat and things like that. But there has been no head-to-head studies comparing infrared sauna to traditional sauna. So those studies actually don't exist. So we just have to extrapolate from what we know and the effects that we can sort of predict from heat and from different exposures. So yeah, maybe one day that research will happen and there'll be a conclusion. But I suspect the benefits are from stressing your body with heat, and as long as you're doing that without I mean, there's all sorts of volatile. It's not just the EMF. A lot of timbers can release volatile compounds that can be irritant, and the chemicals and the glues and the varnishes. So because in a medical facility at the Health Lodge, they have people that are chemically sensitive, electromagnetically sensitive, they've gone a lot further down that road. But I think for individuals, for their own home, they need to decide what they can afford and what's important for them.
Just really quickly, for those that don't know the difference between near, mid, and far infrared, can you sum that up really quickly for us?
Well, you've got the electromagnetic spectrum going from very low frequencies, which are the Schumann resonance that the whole Earth emits, which even subaudible, you can't hear those frequencies, up into the microwave, which is like our Wi-Fi and mobile phones, to then the far infrared, which is coming up to red light, and then mid, and then near infrared, and then red light, which it's in the visible range, it looks red. And then you've got the color spectrum, so you've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and as you go up that spectrum, the light has more energy, so it's got a shorter wavelength and higher frequency. And then past violet, you have ultraviolet, and then you have X-rays, so they're much more high energy radiation. So it's just near, mid, and far infrared. It's just light on the end of the red light part of the spectrum, which is also causes heat. So infrared radiation is heat, as opposed to X-rays or ultraviolet radiation, which is more energetic and can be more damaging.
On a really superficial level, understanding is that near is good for like collagen and plumping up your skin and the face, and then there's mid, far, and then it goes deeper into the tissues and restoration and organs, and understanding that those different ranges of that light that's being emitted and absorbed into the body works at a different level. Is that right?
Certainly different frequencies will have different biological effects. So the far infrared is more penetrative, it heats the body deeper. The research still hasn't caught up with the offerings. So while there is lots of, I mean, I remember in the 1980s, I was studying acupuncture and they were using red LEDs, which is sort of quite new then. And we were using red LEDs on acupuncture points, inserting red light into the body. And red light can be very, very therapeutic, as opposed to I think people are, I think, becoming more aware of blue light and how that can be damaging. So blue light is great in the first thing in the morning. It actually helps wake us up and turns off our melatonin production and is good for the morning. But the blue light we're exposed to now through our screens and through artificial light was never experienced by humans before. And blue light will turn off melatonin production. And if you think about our ancestors, at nighttime they had fire, and fire is orange and red. So you actually, and you get the heat from the fire, but you get the red glow. And that doesn't turn off our melatonin production. So at night time, it's really good to have blue blocking glasses or put screen protectors on that stop blue light to protect your melatonin production. Also to veer to the red side of the spectrum rather than the blue side of the spectrum. So yeah, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done, but generally, yeah, I mean, red light feels good. And even, I mean, sunshine has been vilified in Australia, certainly, that sunshine's really damaging for us. You have to slip, slop and slap and avoid sunshine. But when you go into the sun, initially it feels fantastic. And if you tune into your body, you can feel the benefits you get from sunshine, but you can also feel there's a point where my skin's had enough. It's like you've drunk enough and it's starting to get a bit red and sore and I need to get out of the sun. If you tune into that, it's super beneficial. You need vitamin D. You need to activate yourself with sunshine, which is infrared, although depending on the time of the day as well. So it's really good to, early morning and late at night when you get more of the red lights part of the spectrum as opposed to the middle of the day, where you get more ultraviolet. So yeah, once you start breaking light down into its spectral bands, then you can get more precise with the biological effects. But I think a lot of the equipment that's available hasn't had to prove all this with clinical trials is almost impossible, because for each medical condition you need a particular patient population with that condition. You need to compare the red light or whatever with other frequencies or with other treatments. And clinical trials like that are super expensive to do. They take a long time and no one's going to fund them. So that level of research hasn't been done. So again, we have to extrapolate about what we know about the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, what we know about the biological effects, and then what feels good. And very often it's coming down to what feels good for me in this moment, and is that something I can do regularly? So how accessible is it?
Okay, so we have red light therapy at the Byron Bathhouse, but we don't know the mechanism behind why it's good for us, or it's built on hypothesis.
Yeah, so we know that red light, I mean, it is good for it feels good. It's on the skin. It's great for skin conditions. The red light will expose you to the radiation without the heat, but when you include the far infrared as well, you get the heat as well. So you're just sort of breaking that up. But yeah, generally red lights, it's really good. It feels good. But in terms of having a prescription of this is the dose you need for this medical condition, we're not quite there yet.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Is there anything else? I would love to get a few more pro tips from you. So this is probably like fast and dirty, how you would want somebody to view information really quickly. What do you do before you sweat? What do you do after you sweat?
So some great little pro tips. Well, to help you sweat before you go into a sauna, it's really not like I like to have pre-hydrate. So you want to keep drinking all the time, but you can pre-hydrate with something that's all going to make you flush. So it could be some a ginger tea or a hot ginger tea or cinnamon or some herbs that encourage vasodilation. So the Scientologists do a detoxification where they give you niacin in the vitamin B3, and then that gives you a flush before you go into a sauna. So you can actually use nutrients to enhance that experience. When you're stressed, when you're really stressed in the sauna, like you're really hot, or when you're in an ice bath and you're really cold, there are little things you can do with your body to help you relax under stress. Summarize those into a little poem I call the 10 hacks to relax. So these are things you can do with your body that convince your body you're safe and in your cave rather than running away from a tiger or having to fight. And they're really simple. So it's touch all your fingers, wiggle your toes, soften your stomach, breathe through your nose, sigh, smile, swallow, sing, flutter your eyelids and focus within. So those activities will tell your body you're safe when you're under stress. So if you're in an ice bath or you're in the sauna and you think, oh wow, this is really stressful, I have to get out. If you do those things, you're telling your body I'm safe and I'm in control. So they activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and that can help you when you're in sympathetic drive, in fight and flight response. So anytime you're scared, anxious, upset, or in pain, if you do those things, it'll help calm you down. So there's some little pro tips there. There's some general safety protocols or safety profiles. I call it common sense safety, or for hydrotherapy, which is to drink. You need to always drink, no matter whether it's hot or cold. You need to keep really well hydrated, because the cold will make you pee more, because all the blood's going through your liver and your kidneys, because you've contracted from the outside, so you've got more blood going through your organs. More blood through your kidneys makes more urine, so it'll help make you expel urine. And when you're vasodilated, you sweat, so you lose fluid through sweat. And also your heart has to pump more because you've got more blood vessels to pump it through, or more open blood vessels to pump it through. So you need to make sure you're really well hydrated. So drink, take care, like taking care of hot surfaces. Don't put your hand on the rocks. Careful of slippery surfaces. And slips and trips and falls are actually some of the biggest or the most common injuries in these hydrothermal facilities. So taking care of hot surfaces and slippery surfaces, but also taking care of changing posture. Anytime you're going from lying to standing, especially when you're doing hydrothermal therapies, you change your blood pressure and you change the blood distribution. So when you're going from lying, when the blood gets equally distributed through gravity, when you start to stand, and if you're vasodilated, the blood will go down into your legs and you become lightheaded and dizzy, and you're at risk of fainting. So anytime you're lying, when you sit up and then stand up, do it slowly and hang on to something. So don't just go from lying to standing straight away and walk off. Go from lying to sitting, just wait a minute. Go from sitting to standing, hold on to something, wait a couple of breaths before you start walking off, and that'll just make sure you're not going to faint or feel dizzy or lightheaded. So drinking, taking care, tune in to yourself. Tune into what is comfortable for me today. How am I feeling today? So using comfort as your guide, and you don't want to go beyond being comfortably uncomfortable. So you don't want to get to uncomfortably uncomfortable. Then it's too far. So you don't want to have someone pushing you. Just do it, and just push through that pain barrier. No, you want to make sure you're comfortable all the way. You can maintain relaxed breathing all the way. So tuning in. Be aware of your own limits. Be aware of that point of forced mindfulness when your body's telling your mind, hey, tune in, there's something happening here. And that means you shouldn't do these therapies when you're drunk, when you're under the influence of drugs and alcohol, where your judgment's going to be altered. People do die in saunas, and actually most of the people who die in saunas are related to alcohol, because they either fall asleep or they're just not aware of what's going on. So drink, take care, tune in, be aware, and then rest. Making sure when you do these activities, you spend some really valuable time resting and coming back into balance and actively doing nothing. And you can imagine doing a yoga class and then walking away at the last pose without doing the relaxation end of the class. You'd feel cheated. It's like it's the joy and the benefit that comes from that relaxation at the end. So don't cheat yourself out of the benefits by just doing the activities and then forgetting about the inactivity. I'm big into polarity. You want to go from hot to cold. You want to go from active to inactive. And you don't want to avoid one of those. So the activities you're doing are the hot and cold treatments and exercise potentially. You want to balance that with deep relaxation. So common sense safety protocol is to drink, take care, tune in, be aware, and rest. And that's just a general safety. Because a lot of these treatments, these hydrothermal treatments, they don't require a therapist. You can do these at home. You can do these at the beach or at any sort of spa or hot spring or resort facility. So you want to be in control yourself, and you want to have some protocols you can use to make sure you're in control and you're going to get the most benefit with the least risk.
I like that you're talking about rest. I feel like people don't talk about that. And
Yeah.
also, when people infrared sauna, they book for an hour, they plan to sweat for 45 minutes, they maximize that time, and then they shower and they leave because they have to get out. I know that the bathhouse sessions are going to be 90 minutes. So does that sound like a reasonable amount of time to do the protocol that you recommend and factor in relaxation time?
I think 90 minutes is a good time. If you do 3 rounds, you've got 30 minutes per round. That's good. I've got friends who they go cold water swimming in the river, and then they sort of get in their car and drive off. And I say, look, even if it's just in your car, just lie down for 10 minutes after you've done that cold immersion and rest. And if you go to the gym, and a lot of people, they'll work out the gym, they'll have a sauna, they'll get dressed and just drive off. Having that 10 minutes of just coming back into balance, it doesn't have to be in the facility, it can just be in your car or in some controlled environment. But the rest is really important. And I think that is often the most neglected, because it's sort of, it's the least glamorous. You don't need any special equipment for rest. You don't need a fancy device or some marketed equipment. People don't market rest, but although you do need a good environment and preferably, a quiet, relaxing, soft light, thermo-neutral, comfortable environment. But again, that's not sexy. It's like you can't sell that as a product. So people don't emphasize that enough, in my opinion. But I think that's probably the most important part of the whole experience, is that rest, coming back into balance.
And you're a data-driven guy and you are really into researching things. Have you looked at like what an Apple Watch or an Aura Ring there's so many data providing devices now. Can you see the benefits of this medicinal water therapy or this contrast bathing? Like, can you track it?
Well, you can track it, and individuals can track it for themselves. Actually, I've been talking to a lot of these facilities saying you need to get all your users with Aura Rings and Whoop bands and digital watch, Apple Fitbits or whatever, to start giving their data in. And I haven't seen that happen yet. But most of the wearable devices will monitor heart rate variability, and they monitor sleep. And generally, with hydrothermal wellness, there's definitely benefits with sleep. And we've done research on that with Joy Hussein, my PhD student. We did a whole global sauna survey asking people, why do you sauna? What benefits, what risks? And across the board, people sleep better once they're doing saunas. And again, just the word sauna is a little pet peeve of mine. People talk about saunas, but we think about just the sauna being the hot heat experience. But the sauna experience is contrast. Like sauna is this Finnish word, and they say when we have a sauna, they take it for granted that the cold is there. So when I say sauna, I'm actually talking about the sauna experience, which is hot and cold. And yeah, so that it's not often discussed enough, but the whole sauna experience is something that we can, I guess, calibrate ourselves to how much you want to use it. And what was the question?
We were talking about data tracking. So you were talking about
tracking data
variability.
So when you're doing the hot and cold, it's really nice to be able to track it using your wearable. And generally looking at heart rate variability, and the more variability you have in your beat-to-beat heart rate, healthier, it's more resilient, because it means your body can adapt in real time to what's going on. Whether if it's fixed heart rate, it means your body's not adapting to moment to moment, it's just sort of fixed. So you want to improve heart rate variability. Personally, I don't use wearables myself. I just don't like having things on my body, especially EMF emitting devices on my body. But if people are into that, I think it can be really nice to get a feedback about how your heart rate variability is changing day to day, how well you're sleeping, and then to calibrate the experiences based on that. So I think that's a really good thing if people are into that. I wouldn't go overboard. I think if you can be in touch with your body without those devices, it's better, because you learn to be in tune with your body. But sometimes those devices will help you tune into your body, and then you'll reinterpret, when I feel like that, this is what's happening. So I think it's a really good educational tool for how to use our bodies and how to read the signs that our bodies are giving us. But I don't think it's necessary.
Be really motivating.
Yeah, so really motivating. So I've achieved this, and I'm sleeping so much better. Oh, look, I did that, and my sleep was bad. So I think it's really helpful to educate people about what's going on. But it's definitely not necessary. And I think in the future, and I'm helping, hopefully, designing some studies where we're going to use pooled data from a lot of these devices to get some more information. But I think it's still, we've got more data and there's more people using these devices than really controlled research to give us strong conclusions on their use and their benefits. But certainly for individuals, I think they are beneficial.
Okay, Mark, I just wanted to ask you, because I do want people to become more aware about using spas and bathhouses and some of the telltale signs to potentially avoid a spa or a bathhouse if none of these practices are actually being put in place. So if you were walking towards a spa and a bathhouse, what are some of the red lights that would make you stop and think, do I really want to go into this premise? Is this really going to be a wellness experience for me?
Well, for me, the first thing is often, if I walk in and I can smell chlorine in the air, it's like, really? Often I just won't go in. So having that chlorine smell in the air for me is a deal breaker. Why would I expose? And even when it's in the air, it's affecting your mucous membrane. So air quality. The air quality of the facility, I think, is really vital. So I prefer to be in outdoor facilities, but I'd much prefer to go to facilities which have chlorine-free water. So that's, for me, is really important. So the water quality is really important. And it's not, first of all, not having poison in the water, so having chlorine-free water, but then finding out where is the water from. And I'm a hot spring aficionado. I go around the world visiting hot springs and natural bathing facilities. And there's different mineral compositions of geothermal water and mineral water. So, what minerals are in the water? Have they put in magnesium salts, or is there lithium or boron or calcium or iron springs or carbonate springs or different pH of the water? So I'd like to look at the water quality and say, what are the aspects of this water? Where does it come from? Is it town water that's just been filtered and treated and mineralized, or is it just chlorinated water where they've actually added poison to the water? So for me, the air quality and the water quality are really important. Then, I like a more natural aesthetic, but you go to Europe and some of these places are super clinical. It's like going to a hospital, and that can be really nice too. So, but looking at the cleanliness, is there mold around? Does it smell musky? Air quality is important for chlorine, but also for mold and musty smells. If you can smell mold and musty, there's mold spores around. And is that something you want to expose yourself to? And that gives a measure of the cleanliness, because to prevent mold, it means they have to maintain just good hygiene around the property and not leaving water stagnant all around. So for me, so I like somewhere with good aesthetics. I love Japan. Japan have super sophisticated onsen, and their bathing culture is fantastic. And they've got natural mineral waters, but the environment, then the food offerings and the drink offerings is really important. Is there filtered water to drink, or is it just soft drinks or tap water to drink? So for me, air, water, and food quality, if I'm going to eat there, are really important. Then it comes to the aesthetics. And then it's only after that I'd look at the specific offerings. Is it a steam or an infrared or a traditional sauna? Sometimes, I've been to places in Europe where they'll have 7 or 8 different saunas, with different temperatures and different humidities and different scents in them and all of that. So yeah, that's really fun to look at the offerings and the experience showers and all the different I know Byron Bathhouse have these great experience showers. So that's really fun. But there's no point having a great experience shower if you're bathing in chlorinated water. So yeah, for me, you start with the basics. I'm a big fan of permaculture, and Bill Mollison used to say that when you get the basic things right, other things go right by themselves. But if you get the basic things wrong, it's really hard to play catch up. So if you've got really good water that you're drinking and you're bathing in, it's pretty hard to get that wrong, and then other things go wrong. Because then naturally the air quality is going to be good if you've got really good water. But if you get the basic things wrong, if you've got chlorinated water, then suddenly your air quality is not going to be that good, and your skin's not going to feel that good. And it's really hard to play catch up, because then you have to replace the moisture you're losing from your skin and using moisturizers and stuff, and you're trying to fix the bacteria that you've stripped away off your skin. So it's really hard to play catch up, whereas just support yourself with a healthy environment in the first place, and you're a winner.
Okay, so inversely, if we're working towards a bathhouse and we're looking for the green light and we're looking for the ticks are chlorine-free, filtered water. The water doesn't smell bad. You can't see any mold, or you can't smell that musky smell. What else?
Well, then it comes to the aesthetics. I love nature, having good air quality, but looking around, do you feel good in this space? Or having somewhere we can relax? Is there somewhere that it feels really comfortable? I can just lie down at a neutral temperature and I can just sort of fall asleep. That it feels good for that. So having somewhere like that makes me feel really good. I can just be totally doing nothing, and I feel safe and secure and super comfortable. So that's also, I think, a lot of places don't have that. So I wouldn't not go to a place that doesn't have that. You'd have to sort of improvise. But for me, that's really important too.
Great. Okay, is there anything else we need to know?
Oh, there's probably heaps. So yeah, so you can put this into context. So hot and cold bathing is, you're going to the extremes of hot and extremes of cold, and then you're going to the balance in the middle. And that's one part of what I call extreme wellness, because you can go to the extremes of not just hot and cold, but of hydration and dehydration, of glucose, of feasting and fasting, of breathing, of hypoxia and overbreathing for hyperventilation or breath holding. So I've got a whole protocol where I teach and I run retreats, and I've got online courses where we go to the limits of water, glucose, oxygen, temperature, and carbon dioxide. I'll talk about filtering and flushing your bladder, feasting and fasting your bowel, panting and holding your breath, doing hot and cold with your body, which is what we've spoken about today, and then doing nothing, and then doing everything possible, and then doing nothing at all with your brain. We've talked about that as well. So you want to go through those extremes. You want to do everything possible, being in a flow state or being really active, and then go totally inactive. You want to be able to flush your body with good water. You want to feast and fast. So you want to get the benefits of both. You want to breathing exercises. We talked a bit about using our breath when we go into cold and balancing that. So the breath is the link between mind and body. But there's a whole lot of breathing exercises you can do from hyperventilation to breath holding, and then coming back to neutral breathing. So there's all these other avenues we can do to play with our physiology. But I think the most fun and the most social is hydrothermal wellness, using hot and cold water, ice and steam, and really exploring that range gives you access to all the others. But it's nice to put that in context, I think, that there are other things you can do. And I think it's really nice to make this part of your lifestyle. The study that has been done, the big study, epidemiological studies, say there's a sweet spot above 3 times a week. You want to do this every second day or more. So that means it's part of your life. It's not a therapy you just do occasionally. It's not just something you do a one-off to fix yourself up. It's something you try and build into your lifestyle. Yeah, there's a sweet spot over 3 times a week. There's good research on the epidemiology on populations that it reduces all-cause mortality. It stops you dying. It stops you having heart attack and stroke and Alzheimer's disease and infections and pneumonias and things. So it's a serious medical benefit, a life benefit, but it's something that doesn't have to be prescribed. You can do it at home. You can be in control of it yourself. You don't need even equipment. You just need the knowledge and the willpower to do it. And I encourage people to do it as much as they can, because it feels good. It's good for you. And as long as you're within a common sense safety, there's very little downside. Like, the risks are very minimal compared to the benefits.
I feel like I now know what medicinal water therapy means. When I read that under the Byron Bathhouse, I was like, yes, but, and now that's really clear to me. And can I ask you mentioned blessing the water. Do you bless your own water? What stuff do you put in that?
Well, so I've created this company, Beautiful Water, which is a water filter company. And we spent a long time looking at the designs. I spent quite a bit of time. The way I created that, so I've always been very conscious of toxicity and detoxification, and talking to my patients about doing the basic things first, which is getting a water filter. And they'd say to me, so which water filter should I buy? And I'd say, well, it's really complicated. And they'd say, well, you've got a medical degree and 2 PhDs. If you can't work it out, how are we supposed to work it out? I thought, fair enough. So I tried to work it out, and I went to different conferences and spoke to water expos and water experts, and actually spoke to a lot of Indigenous elders. And I had a really great connection with Grandma Agnes Baker Pilgrim, who was the chairwoman of the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. And she's passed on now, but she used to say, we're all water babies, we have to give thanks to our water. And all the elders I spoke to, including Grandma Agnes Baker Pilgrim, would say, we need to hold our water sources sacred. Now, water is it's a mysterious substance. There are 72 scientific anomalies we don't understand about water. There's still magic in water that we just can't comprehend. And by holding our water as sacred, we change our relationship to it. And all Indigenous communities talk about that. But when you look at water filters and in town water, you've got a meter that just charges you money, and the filter's an industrial machine. There's no consciousness in there. So I wanted to have water filters that have a consciousness to them and have an intention. So I spent a lot of time with designers, and we put in this incredibly beautiful, I think it's beautiful design, which looks like a water drop, but it's also flow forms and water crystal, and it's got all the different forms of water in it. But it's got sacred geometry. It's got Metatron's cube, which contains all the platonic solids embedded in the design. And the lines that make up Metatron's cube are actually text. And that text says, I love you, I respect you, I thank you, bless you, am you, over and over again. And this text is microscopic. So unless you've got a magnifying glass on the whole house filter, you can't read it. Or if you look at the PDF file and you expand it, you can read it. The intention is in there. When the print files are huge because of the detail in this microscopic text. So it means the intention is in there in the design. So that's a form of blessing and conscious intention in these water filter designs. And I've done that for my company, but you can do it yourself for free. Just go to your water filter and put something that's meaningful to you. Put a picture of your guru, or write, I love you, or water is sacred, or whatever is meaningful for you to change your relationship to your water source. I spent, for many years, I used to go with my 2 boys to Mount Donabuang, and we used to get water from the mountain spring, and bring that home. And it was a whole outing to go up to the source of the spring water and actually take water, and really water was sacred because we've actually collected it from the mountain. We've got a beautiful big ceramic egg that we hold it in. But having a special relationship to the water is important, and having this idea of a conscious intention around your water source. And there's lots of sort of esoteric and a little bit fringe videos around how water holds memory and water holds consciousness. But I think there's a lot of value in that. And if water does hold consciousness and does hold memory, we want to be able to structure that water there's a great TED talk and a great book on the fourth phase of water by Gerald Pollack. And he talks about structured water. And I was actually privileged enough in 2016, I went and actually spoke at the International Conference on the Physics, Chemistry and Biology of Water. I met these really hardcore water scientists who are, these are not woo-woo esoteric people. These are hardcore water scientists and quantum physicists and biophysicists and water engineers and scientists who are talking about cymatics and talking about the structure of water and how water holds memory and holds intention. And I wanted to include that into a water filter design. So I've done that with the sacred geometry and the subliminal blessings. I encourage people to do that themselves if they've got a water filter or a tank or a water meter. Just make it meaningful. So yeah, so I think that there's no downside to doing that. It's not going to hurt you by doing that, and it may well help. But I think having your consciousness relate to where your water comes from, according to Indigenous elders, and it feels good. It feels good to know that your water is coming from a sacred source rather than just from a pre-poisoned industrial device.
Yeah, I used to have a water bottle that had a Stop Adani sticker on it. And every time I drank from it, I connected to that movement. And it wasn't a positive feeling. Like it was a positive movement. But I realized that is not what I want to be connecting with my water. And we all write our children's names on their water bottles. So why don't we write,
that's good.
Scarlett, you are loved?
Why don't
we
put
make
heart,
it?
put some something that gives you good feelings.
Absolutely.
There's no downside to that, and if the fact that it makes you feel good, I mean, why not? And I think there are subtle effects of water, and you can go really esoteric into the homeopathy in the way water holds information and memory. That if that's true, then why not use that to our benefit?
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Marc. I love that there are no barriers to this. And I love the cold shower hokey pokey. I definitely want to find a way to include that.
Yeah, that's really fun. So on my website, under poems, I've got a whole lot of wellness poems. So the hokey pokeys there. There's quite a few other, the common sense safety protocol, the hacks to relax. They're all there on my website.
Great. Thank you. And do you think that the Byron Bathhouse is going to win any awards? I know there
multiple.
are some. Yeah, I know.
Don't know about this year. It hasn't opened yet, so it's going to be hard to win this year. Because I know that the Wellness Summit that's happening in October, there's wellness awards associated with that. Might have to wait till next year.
Might have to wait till next year. Okay,
but I think as far as like a bathing facility that's been created with intention for medical therapeutic purposes, the Byron Bathhouse is the pinnacle in Australia right now.
Yeah. And is there anybody else in the field?
Not in the medical side, no.
What do you call that? It's like a clean sweep. That award is guaranteed.
Well, but I mean, it's really encouraging that this is now a thing. I mean, urban bathing centres are become a real thing, and medical hydrothermal wellness centres, I think, is a really great trend. I'm really happy to be part of it, proud to be part of it, and excited. And I'm really have great respect for Ren, who created the Health Lodge and has this incredible integrative practice where the practitioners actually sit down and have patient discussions, group case discussions. And now she's created this bathhouse, which is a first for Australia, and it's really exciting.